today I wanted to come on here and I wanted to actually share my testimony of how God told me to leave my hometown of Milwaukee and to go to Miami. And at this time, like, I was only at my job for 2 months, and God was telling me to actually quit my job. And I didn't quit, and I ended up getting fired on the day that my mom had a major surgery. So it actually worked out because I was able to take care of her, because the surgery that she had, she didn't know that she would be not able to take care of herself. And so it was like I got to swoop in and help my mom. And so this happened like 2 days after, maybe 3 days after Thanksgiving. And so for the holidays, I didn't even I was putting in applications, but I didn't expect to hear back until January. So once January rolled around, I asked God, I was like, where do you want me to be? And it would be nice to like move out of state and go to like Florida or somewhere. And a few days later, I get the scripture basically found in Genesis 12, where it says to Abraham, the call of Abraham, to leave your father's house and go to a land I will show you. And at that time, I was living with my parents in their home. And so basically, the way I knew that God was speaking, that's what I really want to emphasize in this video, is I was listening to my pastor who was remote for me. He was in Chicago, John Hanna, and he was saying, leave your father's house and go to the land I show you. And then as soon as I turned off that, he was talking about it, the next guy that came on was Jesse Duplantis, and he said the same thing. And I'm like, So I knew that when God speaks to me twice about something, I knew that he was trying to get my attention. So then later that week, I had another email come to me and it was like, leave your father's house and go to a land I will show you. So I'm like, okay, God, if you're trying to show me this, continue to confirm it through this message. So then after that, I pretty much got so many messages like about, leaving your father's house and going to a land that I will show you. Okay. And so mind you, I'm not working. So, I didn't even, consider it really in my mind. I'm thinking like, I'm looking for my next job. So I'm interviewing and I'm getting interviews, and all of a sudden it was like they would like be disinterested, and it would be like some of them would ghost me, some of them would stop in the middle of my interview. I had a person stop in the middle of my interview and just like was like, thank you. And I'm like, what? Or like really abruptly get off the phone. And I was interviewing in my hometown, and I'm like, okay, this is weird. So I'm like, I know I'm qualified in some of the positions I know it was overqualified for, but God has his plans. And so I ended up was getting a little discouraged, but I was still hearing messages like, leave your father's house and go to the land I'll show you. So I ended up hearing like God say one day, you're gonna be hired. And so a job called me back that I had interviewed for a few weeks prior, and it ended up hiring me. And so I was like, okay, thank God, God told me I'll be hired. And when I walked in, the first time that I knew God was moving me was when I walked into the office. There was nobody there, and I'm like, wow, it's pretty empty in here. He was like, I'm gonna give you a choice. You can either be here or you can work from home. And I was like, I'll work from home. And I was going to ask that anyway, but it came about where, God was telling me, go and work from home. And so, and that was a prayer that I had wanted to, I had never worked from home before. So this was like my first remote job. So then after that, I began to, really question, like, I wonder where I'm going to be living, where I'm going. And so I decided to travel. And so the first trip I booked after, I had been at my job for a couple of months was to Myrtle Beach, because I was like, I wouldn't mind a beach town. I had forgot all about the, the confirmation about, or me asking about Florida. And so I went to Myrtle Beach, me and my parents went, and we had a good time. And I was thinking, like, maybe God will show me here, if it's meant. And I didn't get that vibe. As a matter of fact, that was one of the worst hotels we stayed in. And it was a good trip, but it was like a funny trip. It wasn't like something that I would definitely want to go back to. But we had a good time. I like Myrtle Beach, but it just was like a bad hotel experience. And so after that, God was continually, like, every message I would hear, he would say, go to the land I'll show you. So then, it came, now this was like in March. So then the next trip I was planning was in July, and I was looking at Florida. But the thing about that was that I wasn't sure what part of Florida. And so I remember being at work one day, and I'm just feeling like anxious, like, I wonder where I'm going to be into moving, because I'm not going to plan so much stuff. When you don't know where you're going to be moving, you just want to know, you know. And so I had an unction from the Holy Spirit that day, and while I'm reading my Bible, well, it wasn't even an unction that day. I will take that back. That day, I just felt like that anxiety, like to know, like I needed to know. And maybe God was putting that in me because that day when I was reading my Bible study, I do the first 5 sometimes, and a lady, I was saying like, you know, I need to find a new church, and a lady said, well, you should come to my church here in Miami. Now this happened July 11th, and I'm like, okay. So then after that, that same day, I'm watching the YouTubers that I'm following, and they were heading to Miami. And then it just seemed like people were, oh, and then another thing, on my phone screen that morning, my trip to Miami with my friends from a couple years prior came on my phone screen. So those were the 3 ways he was revealing it that day. And so I was like, oh my gosh, glory to God, you know? And so I was like, yep, it's Miami. So I was like, Lord, if it is Miami and I'm hearing this right, then I need you to keep confirming it. And boy, did God keep confirming it. So I was like, you know, I was telling my mom, like, we should go to Miami. I believe God is calling me to Miami. And so we were all gonna go. We were all ready to book our flights. And then all of a sudden, my mom was like starting to get cold feet, like, you know, if we leave, we're gonna have to leave out of Chicago, and I don't want to do all that. And we just didn't want to be inconvenienced because we couldn't leave from my hometown airport. And so what ended up happening is I ended up putting a pause on booking. I was about to book the flight because the flights were so expensive in Milwaukee. We were already like, So I was like, well, let me see if I can find a cheap flight in Chicago, and I prayed about it. And sure enough, as soon as I prayed about it, the flights were so cheap leaving from Chicago. So then I ended up still putting a pause on it. I still had other issues because I didn't want to, you know, we didn't want to go through all of the like parking. It had been a while, and we were just hesitant for some reason. And so that day we ended up putting a pause on it, and I was right in the middle of booking. I looked at my phone, and the trip like booked itself. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, you guys, we're going, because look, we already got it, the tickets are not refundable. And so it was like, I know God wanted me to go. So we go and we have a good time. And when I was down there, then I began to start looking at apartments. See, when I was in Myrtle Beach, I was taking tours of apartments. So I started to look at apartments there, but I didn't take a tour. And it was because of the money. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't expect the apartment prices to be so high compared to other places. And so I was like, oh my gosh. So I was going on the trip, and we had a good time, but I was like, clearly, you know, I left the trip feeling like I'm gonna need to get a new job. You know, I'm gonna need to get a new job because I can't afford to get a place with this salary. So clearly God wants me to go at a later date. So we're coming back from Chicago, and we're going through Chicago, and I used to live in Chicago, and I used to work downtown as well. And so while I'm leaving, you know, the airport and we're heading back to Wisconsin, we passed the exit to my old job. And during that time, I was like, you know what, Lord, are you sure you don't just want me to move back to Chicago? It's easier. I know the city really well, you know. And I look up and I see a billboard, and it says from Chicago to Miami. And I was like, oh my gosh, like God was confirming it. And so that was the first billboard that I seen. So then we drive home, and so the trip was in July, and from then every like pretty much a lot of the, you know, the things I was seeing was still confirming Miami. Like he was still giving me confirmations like through YouTube. And then one day even I had a pause ad. It said Milwaukee. I moved from Milwaukee to the sunny state of Miami. And it was like a pause ad, and I'm like, wow. So that was another confirmation. And then I ended up booking another flight to go see Miami's apartments, because like I said, it was so expensive. So I'm like, maybe I can go down there and actually walk up and find a unit. And so I was like, Lord, this was in November now. I'm like, Lord, if you want me to find an apartment, you know, with the money that I have, maybe, you know, you can show me and get me a good deal. So of course, God works supernaturally and gets me a good deal. And so what ended up happening, I was like, Lord, the hotel that I want to stay in all this time, I want to make sure that it's a hotel with a hot tub. And so I look, and there's a hotel with a hot tub, and it was like it sold out or something. I ended up not being able to get the hotel. I ended up asking God again, and all of a sudden, like, a miracle website came on, and the website was like a website I have never heard before, and it came out of nowhere, and I ended up booking my hotel. It was perfect because it was the price I needed to pay, and it actually had the hotel that it was like a random website. That's all I can say. And so I got that at a good deal. So not only was God giving me confirmations, he was also, lowering tickets for planes. He was just making everything affordable for me. Okay. So then the next thing that happened is I am down there, and unfortunately when I go down there, I can't find I couldn't find anything. So on the way back, I'm discouraged again. I'm like, Lord, are you sure that you want me to be here? Because clearly you didn't give me enough money unless you want me to keep looking. And I'm like, maybe I just need to keep looking. But then I was like kind of discouraged, like, because you can look around other places and be like, I don't know, and on the flight, I was like, I'm just tired of looking. I just need to look at something funny. So I decided to watch Bad Boys 2, or Bad Boys, one of the Bad Boys. And I didn't know that when they were flying, because I was flying out of Miami at that time. In Bad Boys, the movie, they were flying over Miami too at the same time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, God gave me another confirmation through Bad Boys. So I was laughing. I'm like, God, that is funny. So I didn't even watch the whole movie because there was so much like cussing and stuff. So I stopped the movie, but I knew that God led me there to make sure that I knew that he wanted me to move to Miami. Okay, so I get back, and it's December, and by that time it's like Christmas time, and I was so frustrated with looking for apartments, trying to find places, not hearing back from jobs, getting ghosted. And so I was like, oh Lord, so I'm kind of like discouraged. So I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna put the looking away for the holiday season and try and enjoy my holiday season. And so me and my dad, we sit down and we watch this movie called Haul Out the Holly. And in the movie, the girl is going through a breakup, just to give you a little background, and she ends up like going home to see her parents. But her parents, as soon as she sees them, they're like, we just want to let you know we're moving to Miami. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So it was another confirmation, and I'm like, okay. So then my daddy started to really believe, and he was like, okay, yeah, you really are going. When I seen that, I couldn't believe it. I was like dancing and stuff, and I was like, that is funny. So he started to believe me too. Okay.
Oh, what's with the get-ups? You're moving to Florida.
That's the plan.
But why?
Well, because it's
Uncle
warm
Dino
there,
lives there.
We can golf you
A
around.
bunch of my college friends are still there.
Oh, I cannot believe this.
Oh, honey, it's not like we're dying. We're just moving to Florida.
We're taking our talents to South Beach
But when?
as soon as we find a place.
You mean like online or what?
That must be our cab to the airport.
Airport? You're literally leaving today?
Yes, sweetie, our flight leaves in 3 hours.
Know how your mother needs to be early?
What's wrong with being a little early?
Nothing. The airport is 40 minutes from here.
If there's no traffic.
When is there ever any traffic?
Mom, you didn't think it was important to mention to me that you were moving to Florida when we spoke on the phone?
Honey, we weren't talking about us. We were focused on you. And you said you wanted to come home for the holidays. Well, here.
So then, this is like right before Christmas, and then during that time, I'm still looking, but like, casually, as I'm working my job, and January comes around, and I felt the unction of the Holy Spirit to say, stop looking at Netflix and go to PureFlix. And so I go and I look at PureFlix, and the first movie that I see is a movie called Learn to Love. And in that movie, a lady is breaking up with her boyfriend and moving to Miami to go stay with her friend. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So that was another confirmation.
James, I mean, how did you manage to do it so amicably?
Because, well, we were friends and work colleagues, but that was part of the problem. Over the 10 years, we went from this big and love romantic couple to just
Well, relationships change. Steph, you're okay?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, now I'm looking forward to the next chapter in my life. And I'm not talking about a man. I just need to get the rest of my life in order. And that means first finding a job.
And you will.
I will.
Come on. So, you said you had something lined up?
Oh, well, an interview tomorrow at a top Miami ad agency.
Oh, well, that sounds promising.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, tell me about this new man.
And then I
Oh,
watched another movie, and it was like they were in Florida or Miami. And so it was like through the movies, God began to confirm that he wanted me to move to Miami. Okay. So then after that, I began to just like continue looking and stuff like that. But I'm like, whatever, you know. I'm like looking for jobs like over time. Like I don't want to think I want to be there on this salary. You know, you get to thinking about money and all that stuff. And so every time I would get discouraged, though, God had something to encourage me. Like I still want you to stay on track to move there. So around this time, I'm like looking, and this is 2025 now. My pastor is still preaching. Like every message I almost would hear would be like, God said to leave your father's house and go to the land that he would show you. And so one day I get this unction. When I watched the news, all they were talking about in my Milwaukee hometown was Miami's art exhibit. Now, why are you talking about Miami's art exhibit in Milwaukee? So I was like, that's a good confirmation. So then every time like I'm looking for like a reason about not going, it was like God will encourage me. Me and my parents were out to dinner. I look up at the screen and they're playing a Miami game. And all I could see was Miami highlighted. And I'm like, okay, God. So then that would give me the courage to keep looking. Like, okay, God, he's on something. So then by this time, I'm calling apartments. And so when the apartment search is, it's continuing, but a lot of people are saying we're either overbooked or we put you on a wait list. I put deposits down and they're like, we'll tell you when something becomes available, you know, stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, God, either you are gonna do something supernatural or, you know, you're gonna give me a new job, clearly, because I can't afford it on this salary. Okay, so then I ended up going to, did I go? Oh yeah, that's what it is. I was booking a flight again around March, like it was like spring break. And so I was like, Lord, if you want me to go back down here again to just scope the land, see if there's something else, get me a really good deal. So the flight that I ended up getting was like $33. And I'm like, whoa, this is really cheap. So I go and I'm like trying to find a time to I'm trying to find a hotel, but I didn't realize it was spring break when I was booking it because in March. And what ended up happening is there was no like really cheap hotels. There was like, and not that they had to be super cheap, but they were like super expensive because it was marked up for, you know, spring break. And so I couldn't even find a place to stay in at the same days in a row. So I would have to stay in one hotel here. Then I was even willing to go into like Fort Lauderdale. And I was like, no, this is crazy. I was like, Lord, this is a non-refundable ticket. If you want me to go to Miami and you're with me on this journey, give me my money back, even though it's a non-refundable ticket. I would say a few hours later, I got bumped off my flight. And they were like, you know what, we're oversold. We just needed to get you out of there. So I was like, okay, that was another confirmation from God. Okay, so then, you know, that was March. And so I'm like, I'm gonna go down there again. And in the meantime, I'm like, I'm just saving money and looking for, you know, places and looking for jobs, okay? And so this is March. So I would say some time rolled around and I was like, you know what, Lord, I wanna really check out Arizona. For some reason I had my heart on Arizona. I was like, maybe God will change his mind and tell me Arizona. So I go to Arizona and surely nothing happened. God didn't say anything. You know, I had a good time, but unfortunately he didn't change his mind. I was hoping that maybe he was gonna change his mind or tell me to go somewhere else. And so, not hoping it, but I'm like, it would be easy. I could just find a place here and this would be, you know, and it was like, no. So I ended up coming back home after my trip, and God was still doing like supernatural things for me, and I thank God for that. But it was cutting me a lot of deals because I was trying to do things my way, but he was still blessing me, you know. And so I ended up going to when I came home. That was in May. So then I would say last year was my birthday was coming around in July again. And what ended up happening is, you know, I was looking at going back down to, you know, Miami again. But then I was like, no, I'm not gonna go. But then an apartment actually showed up and it was like, we have one available. And I was like, okay, God, if you want me to do it, you know, get me a good flight and get me a good hotel. So what he ended up doing is he gave me a really nice hotel on the beach, like where I wanted to stay. And so I was like, and it was a good deal. So, and then I think my credit card came in that weekend, and God was like increasing my credit score too. So it was like God was working out everything for my good. And so I go down there and I ended up, you know, booking a flight. And when I go down there though, unfortunately, I get to the place. No, we don't have anything available. It felt like they didn't want me to have it. But when I got there, just no one came to the door on one end. And so, yeah, and that's pretty much how that happened. So then the next thing that happens is I go home, and this time I'm kind of upset with God. I'm like, Lord, you know, this was my birthday weekend. Although I had a good time, I wanted to buy a purse. There was things I wanted, you know, and I was like, you know, I feel like I'm putting a lot of money into investing into your plan, you know, the flights, the hotel rooms, the stays, the, you know, the travel arrangements, the Ubers, you know, the car expenses, and then taking off my work time, you know, for vacation days and stuff. So I felt like I was putting in faith equity is what I call it, faith equity. And so it was a purse I wanted, and it was like a Michael Kors purse. And so I'm looking through the mall, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna buy myself this. And I decided not to. So when I came home, you know, for my birthday, and I was like, you know, and I was also mad because I was like, I felt like I wasted money coming out here because I felt like I confirmed it with God, and so I was getting angry, you know. And I come home, and my dad gives me my birthday gift, and it was enough money to cover it. And I was like, oh my gosh. So he paid me back for the trip. And then my sister hands me the Michael Kors purse. And you know, she wouldn't have known. So all day I was like, wow. So God was like, don't worry, you just be obedient. Every time I was getting discouraged about something, God was taking care of it. So I just want to encourage you with that. So after that, this is July. So in September, I was getting another unction to kind of like go back again. And so during this time, you know, I'm like, Lord, this time I want to go, but don't let me be empty-handed, you know. So I go down there. I ended up getting credit for a house, and so, you know, I was approved for a loan. That's what I meant to say. I was approved for a loan, and so once I got approved for the loan, I was like, okay, God is confirming this as well. And so I start to look for, you know, a realtor to work with. And then I look at, you know, houses. I was really looking at houses, and then the realtor that I found, she was like, I can look at every house, you know. So it worked out. So I'm in Miami, and this time in September, I go and I'm meeting with a realtor. She's taking me around to houses, and none of them seem like a good fit for me. I'm like, nope. Or like what would happen is they would look like one thing on the picture, and then when you get in there, it was looking like nothing. So long story short, I was like, okay, well, this is clearly not for me. So then on the way home, I was like looking at apartments.com, because mind you, I said, Lord, don't let me come back empty-handed. So I looked on apartments.com, and the apartment had opened up. I go to the apartment on my way out to the airport, and I just so happened was like, let me just go look at it. So I looked at it in person. They were like, yep, it's available, and they were brand new. And I was like, oh, absolutely. So I went ahead and I was like, I'm going to send in all the stuff that I need on my way back, because they needed a couple things I didn't have on me. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and send all those things in via mail when I get back. So I did, and then I got approved for my apartment. And then I found out like a few weeks later that they no longer had opportunity for parking. And I'm like, well, how am I going to park? So then I had to he ended up canceling it. I was going back and forth with God, like, no, God, I don't feel comfortable with this one. So this now was around November, and so the holidays are rolling around again. And of course, God is like, leave your father's. I keep hearing those messages, you know. So I decided to go to Chicago to go Christmas shopping and like look at some stuff for myself. And the funny thing is, I'm driving back home, and I look, and I'm like, every time I think about Chicago and I'm familiar with it, I'm like, you know, this wouldn't be a bad place. I look up, and it said nonstop flights to Miami on a billboard, bright as day. And I'm like, wow. Because God was like saying to me, like, I know that you think that Chicago might be the best option for you, that you should just go back there. You're comfortable, you're familiar with it, but that's not the best place for you. And so at this time, I'm not saying forever, but that's what he was saying at that point. So I was like, okay, guys. So then I went home and I was buying winter stuff and stuff like that. And let me tell you, if you ever get a confirmation that you are supposed to move, wait on buying things, because if you're going to be buying something for a different climate, you might want to hold off on buying things. You want to be prepared, you know, take provision of what you have and then see what you need once you get there, or wait on it, because I was buying like winter stuff because I didn't know how long I was going to be in Wisconsin, but God kept showing me, you know, you're leaving or whatever. So long story short, I ended up, you know, on the way home, once I got home, you know, I kept, you know, looking for places and stuff like that. And the apartment that I was looking at was like, you know what, we have a sister property that's opening up in 2026. And so I was like, okay, you know, I was already on the waiting list for a bunch of things that were opening up in 2026. So I was like, okay. So I was like, Lord, I'm gonna reach out to them. If it's your will, let me go ahead and, you know, let them email me back. And so they emailed me back. So I guess they were taking like a arrangement for people. So because they weren't on the map, I didn't trust it. I'm like, I don't know, I don't trust it, because I had also sent in some applications to a place, and unfortunately they did not get back to me, and they had all my information, and I didn't feel comfortable with it. I felt like it was a scam. In addition to that, I was getting like job scams, and I was just like, Lord, what is going on? You know what I mean? I was like, Lord, give me discernment so I know. And I was starting to get weary with the look, and then I was not, you know, feeling comfortable. So long story short, I end up, you know, reaching out to him via email, and we're going back and forth. And he's like, this is the price. It was a really good price. I was like, cool. But, you know, I sat on it because the holidays were there. I was gonna have to send in money, not see the place again. I just didn't trust it, and I don't know why. It's like me not walking by, you know, faith, because God was also trying to show me, walk by faith and not by sight, you know. And so, you know, even though I called, I talked to people, all these things, I just still didn't trust it. So this is in January. In March, I was like, you know what? I should just go down there and just look at the place. So I was planning on going down there. You know, I was going back and forth. So then one day, I got someone was like, you know, God wants you to go down there. You know, like it hit me because of a sermon. Like he just left. And so I was like, Lord, do you want me to do this? Because I think my pastor was preaching about a fool's journey, you know, where the journey of a fool is going by faith and not by sight, you know. And so I was like, Lord, I'll go, but, you know, I have nothing, you know. So what ended up happening is I put it in the back of my mind again. And so one morning in the middle of the night, I woke up at 3 in the morning, and it was like Abraham left immediately. It was like saying, like, Abraham left immediately to go where God told him to go. And I'm like, So then the next morning, the same time, I wake up, and it was another email, and it was like, the obedient people in the Bible who left when God told them. I'm like, okay, God. So it was like 2 confirmations, and I was like, all right, God, I'm gonna do it. So that week, I ended up packing up all my things, and I was like, you guys, this weekend or next week, I'm gonna set, you know, I was like, Lord willing, if my manager gets me this time off, then I'm gonna go to move. And so he approved my time off, and I was like, I'm just gonna go down there with no apartment, you know. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know if I have enough money, you know. And sure enough, I packed up all my stuff, and I left. My plan was I was gonna call a bunch of places just to make sure. So I had a couple places lined up, but every time I would call them, they were like, no, are you 55 and older? No, we just sold it, we have nothing available. But this apartment got lined up for me, and so when I called immediately, they had a place open. So that's how I ended up with this place. I'll just cut that part short. But I know that it was not until I walked by faith and not by sight in order for me to get this apartment. And so I just want to encourage you that, you know, if God is calling you to lead and do something, definitely, you know, plan for it, because, you know, you can spend a lot of time and money trying to do it in your own strength. Like, okay, I'll just find a job, I'll do this first, you know, and God is like, no, I want you to do it my way. So be intentional of the way you do it. Because even for me, I think that the lessons that I learned was that you could have saved money if you would have just, you know, left originally. And I know that that was not like conventional, because people were not even encouraging me to do that. Like, keep looking. You should be able to find a place. You know, like the people that I had didn't necessarily, you know, encourage that. And I understand, because you know, we want to do things and have everything prepared, you know, make sure that we are covered. You don't just want to go down there on a fool's journey. You want to make sure that everything is in place. But it wasn't until I did it by faith and not by sight that God allowed it to work out for me. Because you can go down there and try, but guess what? All the doors were closed intentionally, you know? And he wanted me to stay encouraged. So one day I remember going into, I'm gonna tell you about the unctions that he gave me. I remember one day I'm like, let me put it to the side. Every time I was like, I'm putting Miami to the side. I walk into Marshall's and I look at the shelves and it said, it was like, I was looking for lotions, and the lotion was Miami Mon. Then I walk into the eyeglass doctor, I'm getting my eyes examined, and it on the screen, Miami, Florida came up, okay? And there were so many other unctions, but those were the ones. And then one day I'm watching TV with my mom, and the guy has like a tattoo and it says South Florida on there. And so every time, you know, I was getting discouraged about to even come, you know, God ended up, you know, showing me like, yes, you should be moving to Miami. So I just want to encourage you that he will work it out for your good, because so far he has worked it out. I've been in my apartment for now 1 month exactly. And so it's been a definite journey, but this started 2 years ago. And I believe that had I been more obedient and more diligent, you know, I probably would have been here sooner. It was a lot of sweat equity, you know, faith equity, not sweat equity, faith equity, to go in, because you have to be prepared to spend your own money to do God's will sometimes, you know, and you have to do it by faith, and it may not look like all the cards are lining up, you know what I'm saying? And so I just want to encourage you that you have to walk by faith. You know, it is good to get the call, but then you have to, you know, sometimes walk blindly into the call, not knowing how it's going to be. So I just want to encourage you with that, and you have a good day.